Another day, another WERW, Real College Radio, Chips podcast. Sorry, I had the music in my ear for a second. Did you hear that?
Yeah, so I heard that a little.
Yeah. So, you're listening to Chips podcast on WERW, Real College Radio. Tyler Melito, joined, as always, by Ryan Amick. Ryan, how are you?
Doing great, Tyler. Ready to talk about some football today. A very NFL-heavy show we have for you guys listening. Hopefully you're big NFL fans. If not, I don't think you've enjoyed many of our shows because a lot of them do consist of the NFL. But
we're in NFL season. It's a sports show.
Yes, it's very exciting. And we had two games last night, a rare Monday night doubleheader in the NFL, starting with...
Did you like that, by the way? Just first off, just like having two football games. Obviously, one wasn't
not
supposed to happen.
Not on a Monday night necessarily, because also, I mean, personal reasons I have class, so I didn't get to see much of the first half of the Patriots-Chiefs game, which was the first game of the Monday night doubleheader. It was originally planned for, I believe, 4 o'clock on Sunday, but of course, Cam Newton, diagnosed with COVID-19, was not able to play, so they had to push the game back to Monday night. Patriots traveling to Kansas City, and Kansas City was definitely favored in this one, especially with Cam being out, but it was a pretty interesting matchup, especially in the first half. It was 6-3, very close game for the majority of it.
Yeah, fortunately also Cam Newton, he has been asymptomatic, so there is a chance that he plays week 5. He's got to have 5 consecutive days without exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, as well as 2 consecutive negative tests. So we'll see throughout the week. Should be interesting. And Brian Hoyer was the starter for the Patriots, and he played all right. I mean, it wasn't great by any stretch. He wasn't Cam Newton at all. But he held his own in the first half for the Patriots, and then the Chiefs did Chiefs things in the second half, and we realized that, sure, Bill Belichick might be the head coach of the Patriots, and they might still have a decent defense, but this is a much, much different team than when they are at full strength. Yeah. They also didn't have their starting running back in Sony Michel, who's been placed on IR with a quad injury.
Yeah, there's only so much Bill can do. Obviously, he's not on the field. He can do game planning, and he did a great job of that because the Patriots defense was holding their own against the Chiefs for the majority of it. I mean, Patrick Mahomes finished with 2 touchdowns on the game. Both of them were kind of shovel passes and not really an impressive, performance by Patrick Mahomes. We've definitely seen better performances from him in the past, but he did enough to get it done for the Chiefs, who won 26-10. And looking at some of the Patriots, like you said, Brian Hoyer, he didn't play great. Both him and Jarrett Stidham, who replaced Hoyer in the third quarter of that game, turned the ball over twice.
Stidham looked hard.
He was 5 for 13 on the game, 2 interceptions, 5 completions. So that's never good. That's never a good sign. And if you're a Patriot fan, you have to be very happy that you have Cam Newton on your roster because this was the quarterback room going up into week 1. I don't know when Cam Newton was signed, but it was very close to the start of the season.
I think it was middle.
So
July.
a lot of the Patriots brass was thinking we might have to start Jarrett Stidham here. Good thing for the Patriots, they haven't had to until week 4 with Cam Newton being out. And not a great performance for the Patriots. Talking about running backs, you said Sony Michel injured, did not play last night. Rex Burkhead, who's taken the majority of the carries so far this year, played decent, but Damian Harris had a
coming off IR,
had 4 carries in his career, in his very short career with the Patriots, and that was during last year's season. His first game he played this year, 17 carries for 100 yards, his first 100-yard game in the pros, so decent for him. Also, the run game in total for the Patriots has been huge this year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with Cam being out, it hurt, but as you can tell, Harris with 100 yards, Burkhead with 45 yards. The running backs did their part in a way, so not awful for the Patriots. Again, not a bad loss. The second time that's happened this season, back in week 2, they had a very close loss to the Seahawks, who are undefeated, a very good team. Now you have the Chiefs, undefeated, very good team, Super Bowl champs. It's not awful that you lost because you had so many people out, especially with Cam Newton being the biggest one there. So if you're the Patriots, you work on it. You're still second in the division. You still have the Dolphins and the Jets in your division, who aren't really going to be doing much.
And a 17 playoff format, too.
Yeah, so if the Bills do end up winning the division, Patriots should be fine looking for a wild card spot. But yes, final score of that game, once again, 26-10, Chiefs over the Patriots. But that was not the only game last night.
One more note on the Chiefs. They're the first team in NFL history to start 4-0. I believe it's in 4 consecutive years, or it might be 5 consecutive years. I saw that stat this morning, which I found very amazing because it just shows how consistent Andy Reid and this team has been under his leadership. And I wouldn't be surprised if that streak continues with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. They got a nice future there.
Yeah, because I was going to say that wasn't even all with Patrick Mahomes. Some of that was during the Alex Smith years in Kansas City. And also, as you mentioned, Andy Reid, great coach. His offensive play calling was very clear last night. Very good plays. Both of the touchdowns were based on end-around sweep-type tosses because one part of the Patriots defense that's definitely the weakest is the linebackers on the outside. So they made sure to target that in last night's game because a lot of the Kansas City receivers were kind of locked down by the good, solid New England secondary. But yeah.
And that's the Chiefs' brand, too. It's not so much the Hail Mary, which albeit Mahomes is very good at, but it's also the jet sweep type plays, and they executed that very well. But you mentioned, before I rudely interrupted you, there were 2 games on Monday Night Football. You had entering the game 3-0 Green Bay Packers versus the 0-3 Atlanta Falcons. And honestly, the Packers just were dominant. No Devontae Adams, no Allen Lazard. Lazard on IR. Adams was questionable to play. He tweeted out early Monday morning that he would not because of a hamstring injury, which screwed my fantasy team. I'm very annoyed about that, but neither here nor there. The hero of the show, other than Aaron Rodgers throwing 4 touchdowns and no interceptions while incompleting 6 passes, was Robert Tonyan, the tight end. 6 catches, 98 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
And this whole year, he's just come out of nowhere. He's been in the league since 2018, had only 15 targets last year. He's had 14 targets this year, caught 13 of those targets, and 5 of those catches have been touchdowns. Yep. Just crazy start to the year so far for Robert Tonyan, a pretty much unknown, just like most of the Packers lineup. Because as you said, Devontae Adams was out last night. So was Allen Lazard, his second option. So they had Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Darius Shepard as really the main 2 wide receiver targets. And then Tonyan as the main tight end target. And boy, did Aaron Rodgers target him a lot last night. He had a great game. One crazy touchdown. All 3 were great touchdowns, but one crazy touchdown that comes to mind is when a Falcons defender pretty much tackled him mid-route. Yeah. He did a somersault, got back up, finished the route, and scored a touchdown the same play. So that was just the type of night that not only Robert Tonyan was having, but Aaron Rodgers, who's looking like the MVP candidate that we all know and love. Future Hall of Famer. He's playing unreal this year. 4 touchdowns last night, 327 yards. And on the season, Aaron Rodgers is just one of 2 quarterbacks that have no interceptions. One was Patrick Mahomes, who we previously talked about. And also Rodgers is doing that, throwing 13 touchdowns for the year.
Second in the league behind Russell Wilson.
So he's just been unreal. The 4-0 Packers are 4-0 because of Aaron Rodgers. And what he's done with this offense, even with the lack of talent that they had in this game, because they did have Lazard and Adams in previous games, but this game they were very low on talent. Aaron Rodgers made it work, as he so usually does. And yeah, if you're the Falcons, this was never a really good matchup for you. Obviously, you have very low spirits coming in to this week-up matchup. Yeah. 0-3 after 2 blown lead losses. The moral couldn't be lower in Atlanta, and it kind of showed. And also, it just Aaron Rodgers against that battered Atlanta secondary was just never going to work out for Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta, and they lost their safety, Casey.
Monte Casey, yeah.
He
tore
went
his
out.
Achilles last night, so he'll be done for the year.
AJ Terrell, their first-round draft pick, he was out with COVID. Darqueze Dennard, the guy who was supposed to back him up, he was not playing. He had a hamstring injury on IR. So the Falcons, they were behind the 8 ball. And then not to mention, on offense, Matt Ryan, no touchdowns thrown, not great. Julio Jones went out with the game. He left with a hamstring injury. Calvin Ridley, 0 targets, or 5 targets, 0 catches.
He's been the one bright spot on this team this year, and he did nothing last night. So
you know it's a bad day when the guy who had the most receiving yards and catches for your team is a guy I've never even heard of. Olamide Zaccheaus, 8 catches on 9 targets, 86 yards, no touchdowns. Yeah. Todd Gurley, by the way, great on the ground. We'll get to him in a second. But that's just not going to be it for the Falcons.
Yeah, if you're listening at home, don't worry. Not even I know who Olamide Zaccheaus is. Tyler, I don't know if you've heard of him, but I definitely
heard of him last night.
You heard of exactly. You had to heard of him because he was really the only person doing work for Atlanta. Aside from Todd Gurley, he had a solid night, 2 touchdowns, 57 yards,
another guy who messed with my fantasy team.
He helped my fantasy team, so I'm not bitter about that. But yeah. But one final note, this is news as well, not related to these games, but Bill O'Brien got fired as both the GM and head coach for the 0-4 start the Texans have had. Could we see the same thing for Dan Quinn? I mean, they also have a very troubling 0-4 start. They had somewhat of expectations. I mean, the Texans made the playoffs the past couple of years, so they were really expected to have a decent team, especially with Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, even with the bad transactions you made during the offseason, you still expect something from the Texans. They've been awful. Fired their head coach and GM Bill O'Brien right away. Dan Quinn, it might not be this week, but it's coming at some point. I mean, unless the Atlanta Falcons have an amazing turnaround, I don't see him surviving this year because they're just on a downward spiral. They're last in the division, and Bucks and Saints are in the division, and I don't see them touching them at all.
I want to say that the writing on the walls for Dan Quinn, but if he was going to be fired, it would have been after last week when he blew 2 straight leads in consecutive games, big leads. And frankly, I don't think their owner, Arthur Blank, that's the guy. I don't think he's going to do it. It would have to be something insane. Like, if the Falcons go winless, I think that's the only way Dan Quinn gets fired. Like, Bill O'Brien, the writing was on the wall the moment he made the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And let's be clear, it wasn't so much Bill O'Brien, the coach, that was so bad. It was Bill O'Brien, the GM. We saw the Laramie Tunsil trade. They got swindled. They don't have their first or second round draft pick because they traded them away to Miami. And then they got rid of DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, who's been up and down, to say the least. Brandon Cooks has not been great. That was a signing. Randall Cobb has been okay. And they now have Romeo Crennel, who's going to be their head coach, the Houston Texans do. I don't know how great that's going to be because he's a defensive-minded coach. So I don't know if that will help Deshaun Watson in the offense. But interesting to see what goes in Houston. But to answer your question, I don't think Dan Quinn will get fired in Atlanta.
Interesting.
There's
been some rumors.
There are rumors, yes.
But yeah, the Falcons, they need to catch up because so far they have not graded well this season. And speaking of grades, we are a quarter of the way through the season, believe it or not.
I did not think we would get to this point. Yeah,
week 4 is over. It's a quarter of the season already done in the NFL. And at this point, most teams know somewhat of their season trajectory. Especially given record, anything can really happen. I mean, an 0-4 team, a 1-3 team could technically make the playoffs or at least make a push, make things interesting. But usually, in the cases like this, it doesn't really happen this deep into the season.
Especially with the expanded playoffs, too. It's now 7 teams.
Yeah, so it could happen. But what week 4 tells us pretty much where everyone's at right now in terms of injuries, who might be coming back to help a team or whatnot. So let's just take a look at the majority of teams on here, and let's see who's graded well so far, who's kind of like middle of the pack through 4 weeks, and who needs some extra help, if you know what I mean, in terms of schooling.
I've never needed extra help. I'm a marvelous student. That's right, Mom. I know you're listening. But yeah, let's do that. So let's start.
Is that true, Milito? I'm going to have to fact check that. We have some old report cards.
Let's not go down that road. Let's not go. Let's start with the teams who have performed above expectations. We'll start in the AFC. I think the team, for me, that has performed best ahead of expectations, there's 2. Obviously, you have the teams that you expected, like the Chiefs and the Ravens. But the 2 teams that have surprised me the most, the Browns, who are 3-1, and the Colts, who are 3-1. We'll start with Cleveland, who nearly blew that game against the Cowboys this past week. They won 49-38. They lost to the Ravens week 1 badly. Everyone's like, oh, the Browns, same old Browns, they stink. Baker Mayfield's not a starting quarterback. But then they've ripped off 3 straight wins, 35-30 against Cincinnati, 34-20 against Washington, 49-38 against Dallas last week. And I know you could say the Bengals, they stink. The Washington football team, they also stink. But
and the Cowboys. Don't leave them
on
that list. They stink
NFC
as well.
Does stink.
They stink
but
as well.
You got to play who's on your schedule. The Browns are 3-1. And ironically enough, I mentioned the Colts. They play the Colts in week 4, so that should, or week 5. So that should be a very interesting game.
In terms of matchups to look forward to in the next week.
Yes.
That's definitely one to circle for sure. I agree with you. Browns definitely exceeded expectations because the expectations were so high last year. They more than did not meet expectations last year. Mm-hmm. They're flipping it around this year. In terms of grading them, I give them about like a B+ type of start so far. That. They're not a guaranteed playoff. Like most of the teams I gave A's to, not guaranteed playoff teams, but it looks like they're definitely on the path to a playoff.
Teams who wouldn't be surprised for making the playoffs.
Yes, teams that are very good, they're clearly above the rest, whether record shows it or not. Like I have a 2-2 team with an A grade I'll get to in a second. But yes, the Browns.
I know who you're talking about here.
Yeah, the Browns, very good start to their season. First in rushing offense. We saw last year with the Ravens in their own division. They were first in the league in rushing, and they were the top team in the regular season last year. So that's a good sign if you're the Browns. Bad news, though, with Nick Chubb going down. He'll be on IR, but at least they have Kareem Hunt, who's played a great number 2 role in this Cleveland offense. It's still a very run-heavy offense, so expect Kareem Hunt to still do well and carry the load for this offense. But also, maybe now guys like Odell and Jarvis will get more targets because there's one less weapon to feed in that Cleveland locker room.
Did you not see what happened last week?
No, I was about to get
Jr.
to that. It was just brings us back to his Giant days because he hasn't had a game like that since he strapped up for the red, white, and blue, the G-Men. He looked terrific. There was obviously a highlight play of Jarvis Landry, his buddy, throwing a dot to him in the end zone. One of the best balls Odell's probably seen in a while. No offense,
Baker Mayfield and Eli Manning as quarterbacks.
Yeah, both. You could definitely make the argument for both. That actually reminds me of when he was on the Giants and Saquon threw a touchdown to him, and that was one of the best balls I saw that year as well, even with Eli on the team.
That was a great play.
But yes, Odell's 3 total touchdowns, including a game-sealing 50-yard run to win it for the Browns.
And that wasn't a simple run either. It was an end-around play where he should have gotten tackled for 20-yard loss.
He probably ran 75 yards on that 50-yard run because he ran across the field and then he ran the 50 yards. So he got a lot of bang for his buck on that run, and it worked out well for the Browns. They're now 3-1 on the season. They do sit at 3rd in the division because they have the Steelers at 3-0 at first. Obviously, they didn't play this week because of COVID. Titans and Pittsburgh got postponed, but they're still at the top at 3-0. Baltimore 3-1, the team that the Cleveland Browns have 1 loss to. So the Browns, nonetheless, great start so far. Definitely deserving of a high grade through 4 weeks. Looking at some of the teams that I'm pretty impressed with, looking at the NFC now, we talked about them already. The Packers, man. A lot of people thought they'd still be good. Obviously, they were 13-3 last year, playoff team. Still have Aaron Rodgers. You can't really go wrong with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. They barely have in the past. And he just looks like he's on another level this year, though. He looks like he's prime Aaron Rodgers, which we haven't seen in a couple years. Not even just last year. He's been obviously an elite quarterback his whole career pretty much, but he hasn't been that special type, especially with guys like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson coming into the league, kind of taking some of the shine away from him. But, boy, has he gotten it back so far this year. The team as a whole, first team ever to score, on average, 35 points per game and had 0 turnovers.
That's been impressive.
4 weeks. As I said before, Aaron Rodgers thrown no interception, has a 70% completion percentage, so he's been very accurate this year. And, Packers have been pretty much unstoppable. They haven't had the strongest competition, don't get me wrong there. They've had the Lions, Vikings, and Falcons, so pretty weak defenses there. But that Saints win was a very good win for them as well. And, the Packers are rolling this season.
Yeah, you say the wins, like I mentioned with the Browns, you got to play the teams on your schedule, and they've taken care of business. And I will be the first to admit, I was not uber high on the Packers. I thought they could maybe win the division, probably make the playoffs, but I didn't think they were going to be this good this quick because it seemed like they were going to transition away from Aaron Rodgers and move on to, if it was Jordan Love or whomever, but it seemed like Aaron Rodgers was about to have 1 foot out the door, given the drafting of Jordan Love in the first round. And I also didn't think Aaron Jones was going to be as good, if not better, than he was to start this season as he was last season. Let me remind you, Aaron Jones had 19 total touchdowns last year. He's already got 4 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving, 3 receiving. No, I can't do math. 2 receiving touchdowns. There we go. So 6 total touchdowns through 4 games. Very solid. 374 rushing yards. He's been phenomenal. You can't underestimate that, especially with Devontae Adams, who has now missed 2 out of 3 games. Really, 2 out of 4 games, really missing 3 because he left early on in that week 2 games against Detroit. And feed Aaron Jones is an actual thing.
And we can both admit, we've said this last week as well.
Yeah.
We were wrong with Aaron Jones. Last year was not an aberration. It has a lot to do with this new offense, which is that Matt LaFleur brought from Tennessee. It's very smash mouth, run heavy, but also Aaron Rodgers finds ways to get involved in the passing game, and he's great in both. He's a very dynamic runner. And also, a part of the reason we weren't very high on him in terms of at least a fantasy sense is because of all those touchdowns he scored last year. But somehow, so far, he's on pace to do it again, repeat his performance from last year. So, yes, Aaron Jones has been a very big part. Both Aarons in that offense, obviously, huge for the Packers and their great start. I gave them an A+ for their start of the season so far.
100% agree.
Looking at the team that's 2-2, I give an A- to because just based on talent, they haven't had the best start to their season, but I know they'll get it around quicker than later. That's the Saints.
Yep.
They sit at 2-2 on the season. They won. They had a big win week 1 against the Bucks. Very highly anticipated matchup between Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Drew Brees came out on top on that one. Had 2 losses in a row, which was rough for them. The Raiders one was a shocker. That was in Vegas, the first game ever played in Vegas on Monday night. Usually that's Drew Brees' night. He was not on that game. Then the Packer game, Alvin Kamara was big for them. He brought it. He made the game close, but the Packers pulled away 37-30 in Week 3. Come back this week, it was looking rough as well, as they were down 14-0 to the Lions 5 minutes into the game.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, hold the phone, what is going on right now? But the Saints scored 35 unanswered and kind of took care of the rest of that. So they got a much-needed win this week. They have the Chargers and Panthers and Bears coming up. Very winnable games for the Saints.
They also have a bye week as well.
And they got a bye week.
They got a bye week after that Chargers game.
Which is big because they still do not have Michael Thomas, which has been a big reason why the offense has struggled in their 2 losses. So if you're the Saints, do not get discouraged by the 2-2 record. Sure, you're tied with Carolina in the division right now. That's not going to last very long. Don't worry, Saints fans. Your team looks solid. Solid A- performance through 4 weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Sorry, I cut you off there if you want to finish.
No, I was just going to say that was the majority of teams that we think have done very well so far this season. Also, quick note, teams like the Bills played great, 4-0. Seahawks played great, 4-0. Both their quarterbacks, too, have ranked top 3 in almost every category. Russell Wilson leads the NFL in touchdowns and QBR, ranks 3rd in passing yards. Then look at the Bills, Josh Allen, top 3 in yards, touchdowns, and QBR. So both those teams undefeated with great quarterbacks. Got to mention them real quick. But yeah, that's just some of the top performers so far this through 4 weeks. We'll get to some of the middle of the pack type of teams when we come back from break. Tyler, what are we going to be listening to while our fans wait?
One more quick thing before we go to break is I want to give a shout-out to teams who I thought have exceeded expectations. Let's start with the Rams. Obviously, they're 3-1, although they've beaten the Cowboys, Eagles, and Giants and nearly beat the Bills. 3-1. I think the Rams looked really solid. And then the Raiders, who are 2-2. And honestly, I thought the Raiders would be winless. So that's all I'm going to say there. But for the break, let's see. What do we want to listen to? We're going to listen to True Love's Flame by David Lynch and Jack Cruz. I don't know who these people are, but hope you enjoy.
Do you ever?
No, I never do, unless it's country music. This is WERW Real College Radio. You're listening to the Chips Podcast. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're listening to WRW Real College Radio. Sorry for whatever the heck that music was. I honestly don't know.
We're just going for short breaks here. We're not really looking for music content. This isn't this type of radio station or radio show, at least for that. But yeah. I apologize for that too. I was very confused during most of that. I didn't know if that was a song or what that was.
We used to be required to play certain songs a week, and I don't know if that's changed at all. So we'll see. But we were talking about the NFL. If you missed our first block, we're still talking about the NFL. We're giving our quarterly grades. A couple teams we talked about teams who have exceeded expectations or met expectations for the top tier teams. Now let's talk to the teams who are like kind of middle of the road. Maybe they're slightly hurt and haven't lived up to their full potential, or teams that, all right, we kind of expect them to be here. So Ryan, why don't you start us off?
So a team that I'm pretty surprised on how they've performed so well, especially given some injuries that they've faced and also low expectations coming to the season, are the Panthers, actually. They sit at 2-2 on the season. They lost their first 2 games to the Raiders and Bucks, but rebounded. And also, those first 2 teams, they had Christian McCaffrey suited up for them. He got injured in that Buccaneers game, and it was looking like it was just straight downhill for Carolina, but they turned around. They've won their past 2 games against, I'm pretty sure, favored opponents in the Chargers on the road. Then this Sunday, beating the Cardinals, a very good offense in the Cardinals. And for a young, inexperienced Panthers defense like this, holding the Cardinals to 21, the Chargers to 16, I mean, that's very impressive. And then also the work of the offense. Teddy Bridgewater had an amazing game against the Cardinals, and Mike Davis has filled in great for Christian McCaffrey. And Panthers, as I mentioned before, sit at 2-2, are tied with New Orleans for second in their division. So I'd say a better than expected start for the Panthers. I give them a B for their first 4 weeks of action. What do you think about the Panthers? Are you pretty surprised on how Matt Rule has done as well? New head coach and everything?
I liked what Matt Rule has done. Obviously, coming from Baylor to here, he had a lot of successes last season at Baylor. They went to the Sugar Bowl where they got blown out by Georgia. But you had this crazy offseason where there was a shortened training camp, shortened preseason, no OTAs, no minicamps. So it was really hard. The expectation or the theory was that a lot of coaches would not be able to get acclimated quickly enough, especially the guys who had come in from college. So someone like a Matt Rule. And sure, there was a bumpy start, but they nearly won week 1. They played solidly in week 2, and they haven't had arguably the best player, non-quarterback in all of football, in Christian McCaffrey, for the majority of the season. So the fact that they have 2 wins, they're looking pretty solid. They got Atlanta next week. That should be a win, given the Falcons. We've already talked a lot about them. Then they have the Bears, the Saints, the Falcons again. So I don't think the Panthers are going to shock anyone by making the playoffs, but I do think they'll be better than what I originally projected them, which I think was like 3-13 or 4-12 or something like that. I definitely think they could get themselves out of the top 5 in the first top 5 of the draft. And also, given the fact that all their draft picks this year were defense, I think they haven't looked great by any stretch, but it hasn't hurt them as much as one would thought, and Teddy Bridgewater also has been phenomenal.
Yeah, that's why I'm so surprised about this Panthers team, because as you mentioned, the entire draft was defensive players. So this whole, because they did lose a lot of players, especially from their Super Bowl team, a lot of their defensive core is pretty much all gone at this point.
Is there anyone from that roster still on the team? I'm curious.
I don't know if maybe K1 Short. I don't know.
Not K1 Short.
Not K1 Short. Yeah,
No.
probably not. And if so, then it might not be very significant. But anyways, yes, the Panthers, brand new defense, brand new head coach, injured star running back, and they still have 2 straight wins. Teddy Bridgewater had 2 touchdowns, threw for 276 yards against the Cardinals. He's been playing great. Robbie Anderson has also been playing great as a product of Teddy Bridgewater. So yes, Panthers, great start so far.
K1 Short is on this Carolina team, by the way. Just had to throw that in there.
Was he on the?
I think so. I'm 99% sure.
Potentially. All right.
We'll roll with it.
Yeah, why not? Moving on, though, staying in the NFC, the Bears, they've had a pretty similar start to the Rams in that I did not have very high expectations for them, but they both sit at 3-1. But they very well could have worse records if things had rolled differently, especially when you look at the Bears. Their first 3 games, all wins, they could have all been losses very easily. You look at the Lions game, most noteworthy, rookie DeAndre Swift dropping a easy touchdown that would have won the game for the Lions. The Bears etched away with the win in that game. Then next week against the Giants, barely squeaked out a 4-point victory against the hapless Giants. And that was pretty much the end for Trubisky. He ended up getting benched in week 3 when they were versing the Falcons and down very big. But per usual Falcons fashion, blew a lead. Nick Foles came in, saved the day, and got them that 3rd win. They ended up falling this week to the Colts 19-11 against a very good defense, so that was pretty understandable. But yeah, the offense was just not looking great again. In this game, they have the Bucs coming up.
Thursday night football.
Primetime matchup. So if you're a Bears fan, you're feeling good early in the season. That's why I give them like a B so far. Like, because you've exceeded expectations. You're doing good right now. You're second in your division. There's not much to worry about at the moment. But quarterback is still very uncertain. Sure, Nick Foles did great against the Falcons. He struggled a lot against the Colts. Not a lot of offensive weapons on this team in general, aside from maybe Allen Robinson. And the defense has to do a lot of the heavy lifting, which against some of these teams that they have to face, especially in their own division, you look at some of the teams they have on their schedule, Rams, Saints, Packers. I mean, these are some good offenses. So it's going to be tough for the Bears to sustain the success throughout the rest of the season. But if they maintain, I feel like they could squeak in as a wild card because the Packers are most likely going to win the division. But because of this great start that they've had, because they do have a strong defense, if Nick Foles does just enough to get them to 9 wins, 10 wins maybe, then they could make a wild card spot. But yes, the Bears, decent start so far. Don't get too excited because you could very easily could have had a worse record at this point.
Yeah, and I think 9 wins might be enough to get the Bears in there. And looking at their schedule, sure, they probably should have lost one, if not both of those games against Atlanta or Detroit. But they were in contention this whole way against Indianapolis. They lost by 8. So there's definitely a chance there. Nick Foles didn't look horrible. 26-42, 249 yards, a touchdown and a pick. And I think the thing that has been interesting the most was Allen Robinson. He was demanding a trade that came out after week 1. They thought there was no way he was going to stay. And then last week he had 7 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. And overall, I feel like he's looked relatively solid. 25 catches on the year for 331 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but that is likely to change. And I think the Bears' defense has also been pretty solid as well, especially given the fact that after last year's abomination of a season on defense, Khalil Mack, he's obviously a leader on the team. Akeem Hicks is back. Roquan Smith has played solidly. So the Bears have been a pleasant surprise for me. One other team I want to talk about, unless you want to talk about
Yeah,
any
I have
more.
a couple more, but I want
right.
to hear some of your teams. That
I think a team that we have to mention are the New England Patriots. Obviously, they lost Tom Brady in the offseason. We were mentioning them a little bit earlier, how they didn't have Cam Newton last week, and they had no chance of winning against the Chiefs without Cam Newton. But I think the loss of Tom Brady, everyone thought, including myself, there's no way the Patriots are going to be as good as they were. Sure, Bill Belichick's a great coach. Cam Newton, when healthy, he's a great quarterback. Health is a big question. And through 4 weeks, I think the Patriots have actually looked better than I expected. I would give them around a B, maybe like an 86, close enough to a B plus where they might be going up. And maybe if they won that Seahawks game, they'd be a B plus, A minus. But I think they've looked relatively solid at this point. They have their bye week, I believe, in week 6, so they'll get a nice little break. Hopefully Cam Newton can get healthy from COVID-19 and recover, and the Patriots can go on to continue. And I don't think, sure, the Bills are 4-0 at this point, and they look like the odds-on favorite to win this division for the first time in seems like forever. But I wouldn't be so confident if I were the Bills and their fans, because the Patriots are still the Patriots, and Bill Belichick's still Belichick, and there's definitely room there for the Patriots to make up some ground, especially since the Patriots do still play the Bills twice this season.
Yeah, Bill's going to Belichick. We know what we're going to expect from him. I also gave the Patriots a B plus range because they've had a good season so far. They've had 2 very tough matchups, which is why they sit at 2-2. Losses to the Seahawks and Chiefs. That most teams will lose to those teams. Those are some of the cream of the crop of the NFL right now. So that's been tough for the Patriots, especially when you have Cam Newton out during one of those games. But still, the Patriots make good with what they have. As we mentioned earlier, Damon Harris was big for them in their loss to the Chiefs. Guys like Damiere Byrd, most people probably don't know, was one of the main targets for the Patriots last night and throughout the majority of the season. So they don't have much in terms of looking at the roster and just star-studded talent in that sense, but that's never been really the Patriot way. They always find ways to play smart, play great defense, which their defense is still great, even though they lost pieces like Kyle Van Noy in the offseason. Mm-hmm. They're still solid, especially in the secondary. Most of their secondary is still intact. And, of course, Stephon Gilmore, reigning Defensive Player of the Year, is still at cornerback. So, yeah, the Patriots, they're their usual selves. It's obviously different this year. This is a much different Patriot team than anyone's ever used to seeing, at least in the past couple decades. But they've held their own so far, and the rest of their matchups coming up don't look too intimidating. The Broncos, still don't know if they'll have Drew Lock. That's their next opponent. Unlikely he'll play, so that's a favorable matchup for the Patriots, especially if they can get Cam back, because he could be eligible, but depending on when he returns and is fully cleared, he could definitely play this weekend.
Broncos at home too, and then they have their bye week, which is nice.
Yeah, so Patriots, decent start of the season so far. Who else do you think has had a decent start, not too great, but also not throw in the towel already?
I mean, there are a couple teams that are sitting at 2-2, where you're like, okay, they are still solid, but they haven't met expectations. Like, you have the 49ers, who obviously been riddled with injuries. They're sitting at 2-2. The Arizona Cardinals, who I thought were going to be much better, they're 2-2. So I guess I would highlight the Cardinals, but I honestly think they're close enough to where they could be in that seed range. I'll give them like an 81, and I think that's being a generous professor at this point, because look who they beat. They beat the 49ers, okay, very solid. They beat the Washington football team 30-15, but then they've lost in back-to-back weeks to the Lions and Panthers. I really don't know. Kyler Murray, at sometimes he looks to be the next best thing in the NFL at quarterback, and then other times he doesn't look so great. DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's been well worth the investment of trading away David Johnson. 39 catches on 46 targets for 397 yards, only 1 touchdown, but I think that's likely to change. But overall, I'm not super high on this Cardinals team where I'm like, God, they're really going to make the playoffs this year and they could be good. I think maybe they're a year, maybe even 2 away.
This team confuses me more than anything.
I agree.
Their start of the season has been so weird because it started great. Their first win against a healthy Niners squad coming off an NFC title That was a big win for them. And Kyler played great in that one. And his numbers the past 2 weeks, which were losses, have almost been better than his numbers during the wins, which has been odd. He's thrown for 5 touchdowns the past 2 weeks, only threw 2 the first 2 weeks. He did more on the ground in the first couple of weeks. He scored 3 touchdowns on the ground, and that was a big part of their game in the first 2 weeks, was Kyler Murray making things happen on the run, hitting DeAndre Hopkins, who had a great first 3 weeks, but kind of struggled and didn't do much this Sunday. And just looking at their 2 losses, Lions and Panthers, those aren't teams you would expect the Cardinals to lose to.
No.
Especially because this Cardinals team has a strong offense, and the Lions and Panthers have weak defenses. So that should always spell out a win for the better offensive team. But again, the Cardinals don't really have a good defense, so that's kind of the reason why they lost those past couple games. And they've given up around 28 points per game through their first 4 games. So really the defense is the main issue here. Sure, Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, you expect them to do great. They've done great for the majority. Didn't have the best game on Sunday, but that's not the problem here. It's the defense for sure. They really need to figure it out there. They have a couple playmakers. Chandler Jones has still been great. He's nearing
Syracuse.
He's Syracuse alum, nearing 100 career sacks.
Mm-hmm.
He'll get that eventually this year, barring injuries. So he's been solid per usual for them. But the rest of their team is just not been up to par. So yeah, very confusing, weird start for the Cardinals. Next matchup against the Jets and Cowboys. So they could definitely get back on track and make way in their division, which is tough too, because they're 2-2 right now, which isn't awful, but they're tied for last in their division because they're with the 4-0 Seahawks and 3-1 Rams. And even the Niners are 2-2, and they're a very good 2-2 team. So this division is tough, and they need to fix their defense. Pretty much that's all you could say about the Cardinals so far this season. They look like they could either be a playoff team if their offense does enough for them and their defense can pick up the slack, or they could just be a lottery team that's pretty similar to last year, around like 6 wins, because they have pretty much the same issues as they did last year.
I agree. Let's transition to the teams that have underperformed, because I feel like that's obviously very big. There have been a lot of teams who have underperformed, to say the least. And I'm going to start it off with the Houston Texans. Obviously, they start the year with 3 gauntlet games against the Chiefs, Ravens, and Steelers. Then they lose to Minnesota. They nearly won that game. It came down to a controversial play call at the end against Minnesota. And then, obviously, they fired Bill O'Brien. But they're 0-4 with arguably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That's simply not going to get the job done.
Yeah, Texans are a mess right now. I gave them a D, and that's you really can't do more than that, because this team has just looked lost all season. As you said, you couldn't have asked for a worse scheduling start to the season.
What did Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans do to the schedule makers? That's my question.
There must have been DeAndre Hopkins fans or something, because that's just rude. How many Chiefs, Ravens, Steelers defenses all in a row? Come on. I thought also this week against the Vikings, I thought this was the game that would get them back on track. I thought Deshaun Watson would have torched the Vikings defense, which is young, lost some pieces in the offseason, like Xavier Rhodes. They drafted some guys to replace them, but they're still young. They're not exactly up to par just yet. So I thought Deshaun Watson could have taken advantage of that. He did not exactly. The defense didn't do many favors, giving up 31 points to a Vikings team that has Kirk Cousins at the helm, who hasn't been great this year. So it's just not. That was a very bad loss, and that's what kind of crossed the line for the Texans, and we're like, all right, we have to get Bill O'Brien out of here, because this start to the season, sure, 4 games is not a lot, but losing all 4 and losing a very winnable game like this past weekend is just not a good look. And it makes sense that the Texans need to find something to look forward to, because, like you mentioned earlier, they don't have many draft picks coming up, and their draft picks this year have barely played at all. They didn't have a first-round pick. Their second-round pick punched a guy and has barely played. Another rookie was a healthy scratch. I don't think any of them have suited up for the Texans, and they don't have draft picks in the future. So they're kind of stuck right now. They don't know what to do. They don't have a coach now. This is a rough start to your season. Texans, you get a D. You're in danger of failing.
I think
they're a top 5 pick.
I think they've already failed at this point.
Yeah,
it's maybe turn around.
Especially with their expectations, because some of the teams we'll get to that have disappointed so far, they didn't really have expectations. Mm-hmm. Like some of the bottom feeders of the league. The Texans were a playoff team for the past couple of years.
They had a lead against the eventual Super Bowl champions in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And now look at them. It's just how things go in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Another team who I think is disappointed a lot, and it was ironically the team the Texans played, the Minnesota Vikings. 1-3 on the year, but they've beaten the Texans, who have also looked horrible, like we just mentioned. The Vikings had lost week 1 to the Packers, week 2 to the Colts, week 3 to the Titans. And I honestly don't know what it is. Was it just because Stephon Diggs is no longer there and Kirk Cousins can't throw to anyone other than Adam Thielen? Like, Cousins, he still played solidly, 883 yards, 6 touchdowns on the year, but he has a QBR of 48.5. Like, I don't know what it is with this team.
He's also struggled turning the ball over. He has as many interceptions as touchdowns.
That's not going to help.
With 6. But honestly, the wide receiver thing is not even the big issue for the Vikings because you still have Adam Thielen there, and Justin Jefferson's played great in filling in for Stephon Diggs. Sure, Stephon Diggs is obviously better. He leads the league in receiving yards through 4 weeks. I mean, he's a stud, and he fits great in that Bills offense, and I love that he's there, and that's a big reason why they've had such success so far this year. He's huge for them. He's a big loss for the Vikings, but at the same time, Justin Jefferson is top 10 receiving yards. He's been a decent target so far. And Dalvin Cook leads the league in rushing touchdowns and is obviously the main part of this offense, which ranks 5th in the league in rushing. So looking at the numbers, it should make sense that this team is solid offensively and they should be getting these wins. But it's the defense, I think, that's really hurting them. They lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, like Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, Xavier Rhodes. I mean, they lost a ton of pieces.
But they let him go. They didn't even,
I know they let him go, but that's still, like, they don't have him now. They did get Yannick Ngakoue, which was big, but then Danielle Hunter, who he was supposed to pair with, he went on IR, so he hasn't really played. I believe Anthony Barr was injured for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. He's missed some time. Eric Kendricks has missed some time.
Yeah.
So it's overall not great.
So injuries, bad defense, young team. They had a lot of draft picks this year, and it hasn't worked out for them. And you look at some of the point totals they've given up this year. 43 of the Packers, 28 to the Colts, 31 to the Titans, and 23 to the Texans. You know, not great. And that's a big reason why they sit tied for last in their division. They have Green Bay, who they're not going to get in front of, that's for sure. So if they have any shot, it's for a playoff wild card spot, and Chicago currently is at 3-1. So they are looking like the big road bump for Minnesota. If they want to turn their season around, potentially fight for a wild card spot, they have to go head-to-head with Chicago pretty much. Those are the two teams to look at in this division, aside from obviously the leaders in Green Bay.
Yeah, and before we take a quick break and close out the show, I think a couple other teams we have to mention. The Chargers, they've been all right. The Jets, they look horrible. Adam Gase should not have a job as a head coach. That's just me. Dolphins have looked all right. The NFC East stinks. You want to rant on the NFC East real quick?
I'm glad you mention them for last because all those other teams, yes, they aren't good. They weren't really supposed to be good. But the NFC East is embarrassing.
Oh, my God.
Embarrassing. 3-12-1. I don't know if that's the worst record by a division through 4 weeks, but it's up there, undoubtedly. I don't even have to look at it.
And honestly, the Cowboys shouldn't even have a win because they nearly... They got that blown lead against...
Mm-hmm.
Or the Falcons blew a lead against them, so it's like they should be really 13-1, if my math is right. The thing with the NFC East is their negative point differentials across the board. Eagles allowing opponents to score 23 more points than them so far this year. Washington, 33. Dallas, 20. New York, 49. I feel ashamed to be a Giants fan, Ryan. Also, it's horrible right now.
Yeah, it takes talent to be the worst, like the last place team in the worst division in football history. And that's what the Giants are. They're literally the lone last place spot at 0-4 in the division. Eagles atop the division at 1-2-1, which is just an ugly record. Just looking at it.
Like you could say the Jets
just by the eye test.
Yeah, you could say the Jets are worse than the Giants, but the Jets at least they have a 4-0 team in their division, and they nearly beat the Broncos. They played okay against the Bills week 1, then they got blown out by the 49ers and Colts. But the thing with the Giants is just like they haven't looked good at all. They had that league against the Steelers, and after that it's been horrible. You know, it's like obviously Saquon Barkley's hurt. Let's not get that wrong. But like Daniel Jones, 889 yards through 4 games, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's taken 14 sacks. No bueno. And he leads the team in rushing with 137 yards. So, I mean, what is going on here?
Well, it's pretty hard to win football games when you score one touchdown in 3 weeks, and that's what the Giants have done. They, past 2 weeks, check their scores real quick. I feel like they finished with 9 points the past two games.
36-9, 17-9.
Yeah, all field goals the past 2 games, 1 touchdown against the Bears. I mean, it's both sides of the ball look bad. The defense actually looks pretty good. They ranked at the top top of the league in yards per game allowed. They've been solid in that sense. James Bradbury's been a pretty good offseason signing. It looks like he's among the lead leaders in pass deflections. He's a good number one, good option on that defense. And as a whole, they've done decent, but the offense is just unbearable to watch because they spend so much time in draft picks to try to fix the offensive line for the past decade. Pretty much since the last Super Bowl they won, their offensive line has been in shambles, and they can't figure it out no matter who they draft. Even when they end up drafting decent guys like Weston Richburg and Justin Pugh, they trade them, and now they're gone. And then now you have Andrew Thomas, who's looked far from great so far. Will Hernandez, who I thought was going to be a monster coming out of college, and he's just done nothing but underwhelm. And a bunch of randos on that offensive line. And it hurts, obviously, no Saquon. Daniel Jones, turnover machine. He definitely has more turnovers than touchdowns. I don't even have to look that up. That's definitely a true statement. But yeah, the NFC East as a whole, sure, we like to go at the Giants because we're Giant fans. We're disappointed. We don't like to see them 0-4 and see them at the bottom of the league another year in a row. But that whole division needs work. One final thing I want to say, which is kind of interesting. Every team in the NFC East ranks last in turnover differential, which I think is a big... Yeah, turnovers are huge in the NFL. Mm-hmm. You look at last night's game, Patriots-Chiefs. Patriots had 4 turnovers, Chiefs had 1. That was the difference in that game. All the turnovers the Patriots gave up, that was really the difference in that. And that made the difference in all these teams in the NFC East so far. Yeah, just rough. Very rough. I gave them all Ds.
I'd give them all Fs, personally.
The only team I don't even know, did we mention the Falcons? I mean,
we've ranted on them enough.
Yeah, we've talked about them enough, but that was the only team I gave an F to. Because not only are they 0-4, the 2 blown leads, and the one good spot on their team didn't play good yesterday. Yeah. So there's just literally nothing if you're a Falcons fan. But yeah, so those are our mid-quarter season report cards for the NFL. Some teams definitely doing better than others, but we'll look forward to doing this probably another...
in 4 weeks.
Mark. Maybe if we do half season. But yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Ryan and I will get our blood pressures down from ranting about the NFC East. We'll talk a little NBA Finals because Game 4 is tonight, Ryan. I know.
That was fast.
Yeah, I know.
It started last Tuesday, right?
Yeah,
that was Game 1. Yeah.
Or last Wednesday.
We weren't even a game in last Chips episode. Now we're at Game 4.
Yeah. All right, so this is Morning by Francis and the Lights. We'll be right back in a minute 38. You're listening to WERW, Real College Radio. All right, we're closing out the show. About 10 minutes left. WERW, Real College Radio. You're listening to the Chips Podcast. Tyler Melito and Ryan Amick here providing you with your weekly sports news. We've been ranting about the NFL, but Ryan, Game 4 of the NBA Finals is tonight. Lakers currently lead the series 2-1 over the Heat. But Game 3, the Heat balled out.
Absolutely. And most specifically, Jimmy Butler balled out. He had the first 40-point triple-double in a finals win in NBA history. The only people that have 40-point triple-doubles in finals history, LeBron, his opponent, who ended up losing that game when he did it, and then Jerry West years and years ago. So Jimmy Butler, an historic game in Game 3, coming back because this team looked like it was reeling. They got dominated in Game 1. Lost Game 2. And yeah, I mean, it was rough. Both games were rough, if we're being honest. Anthony Davis was on fire. LeBron James doing his own thing, too. And we look at LeBron James, his 25-point triple-double is just like what he gets now, and people are saying he shouldn't even be finals MVP if the Lakers do win. And, I mean, Anthony Davis has been great, or was great the first 2 games. But Game 3, he didn't show up. Trouble. He did not show up. He got a lot of foul trouble, only finished with 15 points. Shot decent, 6 for 9 from the field, but it's just not going to get it done in a game like this, especially when Jimmy Butler is just absolutely going off in this game. Looked unstoppable. Didn't even hit a 3. Scored 40 points. Just a great game from him. Really, and he was bad-mouthing LeBron James, too, saying, like, I forget what he said.
I don't remember what he said, but I know exactly
like, I'm dangerous or something like that, or watch out. Something like that. He's telling LeBron to don't underestimate him, because that's what everyone has done to this Heat team this entire year. Throughout the whole bubble, I don't know how many people thought the Heat would make the finals. I mean, some people thought, but there definitely were an underdog story. Don't count out Jimmy Butler or the heart of this whole team. I feel like they could definitely get another win, maybe push the series to 6 games against the Lakers, just based on their heart and their effort in playing. And also, big news coming out today that
You took
Bam,
my breaking news.
Oh, I'll let you. I didn't say it yet. I didn't say it. I just said there's big news, Tyler.
Because I am the Bam fan.
What is the big news?
I'm the Bam Adebayo fan of this show, Ryan. We know this.
You're the Bam stan.
Yeah, I am. Bam Adebayo was out games 2 and 3 with a shoulder neck injury. Really wasn't clear, but he has said he plans to play in Game 4.
Big news.
Huge news, because obviously Anthony Davis is arguably the best big man in the league, and Bam Adebayo, I think even at 50%, is still better guarding him than Kelly Olynyk or Myers Leonard, who, don't get me wrong, have done a very solid job in filling in for Bam Adebayo. But it's hard to replace an all-star with 2 non-all-stars most of the time. And I think Bam Adebayo is one of those players. So if he does play tonight, because there obviously is still something up in the air, maybe he doesn't, all signs pointing to he will, how much of an impact does he have, do you think?
Oh, absolutely huge, because a big reason why this Lakers team was so dominant, especially earlier in the series, is just the overall size of this team. They've dominated teams throughout the playoffs with their size. Portland couldn't handle it with just Yusuf Nurkic. Rockets don't even have a guy who's over 6'10", so that goes without saying they struggled with height in that matchup. And then Jokic outmatched by Anthony Davis. Now you look at this series, you do have Bam, and he played decent in Game 1, but then he ended up getting injured, and when he was out, Anthony Davis led to an easy 2-0 lead for the Lakers, excuse me. But yeah, Bam coming back is very big. It really eliminates that height issue for the Heat when guarding the Lakers, and it's definitely a big gain for the Heat. Looking at some of the playmakers off the bench for the Lakers in Game 3, Kuzma scored 19, Markieff Morris scored 19. Definitely look for more of that. Definitely from Kuzma. I was waiting on him to have a big series in this. We talked about some of the tea he had with Tyler Hero last week.
Tyler Hero
love triangle there.
Definitely shut Kyle Kuzma up.
Oh yeah, he gave him that stank face last night, and that kept him quiet. Interesting to see though if Kyle Kuzma can respond Game 4. More importantly, can Anthony Davis respond off an underwhelming performance, and can LeBron James respond, because he got some backlash for walking off the court, a la maybe Isaiah Thomas, not in the same sense. Don't
Isaiah Thomas was deliberately.
No, that was rude. I don't agree with that. But LeBron James still not a great look. Having Jimmy Butler pretty much single-handedly beat him and Anthony Davis, mean mug him, talk trash to him, and then LeBron James prematurely walking off the court. Not a good look in Game 3. Look for the Lakers to come back. I feel like they will win Game 4, but I don't think the Heat will go in 5. This team has a lot of heart, a lot of fight in them. There's a lot of history between Pat Riley and LeBron James as well. I think they have a lot to prove. So I'd say this series might go 5-6 games. But yes, Lakers I think will inevitably win. And come next week, we'll probably know who the NBA champion is, regardless, because it ends next Tuesday, regardless. If it goes to Game 7, yeah. So most likely by next Chips episode, we will know who the NBA champions is, which is very odd. Given this whole year, it's October, we're just finding out. It seems like a whole different year. Literally, the 2019 season started about a year ago. And now we're just finally realizing who the champ is. And kudos to the Raptors, who have managed to be the longest reigning champions in NBA history. They've been champions for quite a minute. Someone's got to unseat them. It's most likely to be the Lakers.
I will say, if the Lakers lose this game, it's a whole new series, given the fact that things are tied up at 2. Yes. They need this win if they want to win this series. And I think there are 2 ways they do this. One, they beat up Bam Adebayo. I'm not saying get dirty, but I'm saying throw Dwight Howard.
Really talking about the Isaiah Thomas,
JaVale McGee.
Bad boys days right there. They just straight up
I want to go that far.
Him.
But Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, Anthony Davis, just use that muscle of Bam Adebayo, who we know is not 100%. And also, Danny Green and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Learn how to play basketball, please.
Danny Green especially.
He's been horrible.
Brutal this whole
2 points
bubble.
in Game 3 on free throws. Danny Green, the guy's a 2-time finals champion. He was a huge part of the Raptors team last year. He needs to step up big time for the Lakers. And I'm not even saying go for 20 points, 25 points, whatever. Just be someone who LeBron can kick out to.
Shot.
Yeah,
literally
exactly.
Just do your job, which is literally sit in the corner, hit threes, which you've been known to do your entire career. The defense has fallen off with age a little bit, which is kind of expected, but you at least have to counteract that with good offense, and he hasn't done that either. So yeah, he's been a big liability. He needs to step it up, especially if the Lakers want to avoid going down or losing the lead and having the series go tied 2-2. It almost is a must-win for the Lakers more than the
Big
Heat
time.
because of that. Because if the Heat win, not only do they have all the momentum, they have Bam back again, and he'll be ready to go. And the Heat might be in the Lakers' head at that point, but that'd make for a great series. Either way, I want this to go as many games as possible. I want this to be very entertaining, which it has definitely been, especially Game 3. I was good to see the Heat not lay over and die, because a lot of people were like, it's sweep time. But yeah. I didn't believe that. I knew the Heat, they're a different team.
They're a different breed.
They won't just roll over, especially Jimmy Butler, the heart and soul of that team. Never say die attitude. Loving some of his interviews too. So he's kind of like a Kawhi Leonard in that sense. He's not very flashy. He knows his job, works hard. Good two-way player, and he's leading his team in the East to the finals. So some little similarities there, but yeah, Jimmy Butler has definitely proven his worth in the bubble as a whole. Really looking forward to Game 4 tonight.
Yeah, should be fun to watch. I'll definitely be watching. We got very little time left, so any closing notes? Otherwise, Ryan will close out the show. So do you have anything you want to get off your chest?
Go Yankees.
Yeah, Yankees Game 2 tonight against the Tampa Bay Rays in the ALDS. It should be fun. You've been listening to the Chips Podcast on WERW Real College Radio. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito. I can't get my own name right. That's a shame. We're going to close you out with Every Other Memory by Ryan Hurd. More country music. Also, shout out to my grandma, who I found out was listening. Grandma, I love you. Have a great day. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.